This series is going to be full of spoilers. Only the first paragraph or two will be devoid of spoilers. I also curse like a sailor at times. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hackers is a film from 1995 and is one of my favorite movies of all time. In fact, I love it so much that I would say it almost single-handedly inspired me to make this series, named after the segment where I watched it for the first time on G4. No joke, I still watch this movie at least once a year, if not more. It may seem odd for me to name this movie of all movies in my personal top 10 of all time, if you're familiar with the movie as well as my Kojima's Deception series, but it's true. I watched Hackers at a fairly young age, somewhere between 12 and 14 years old. It was the TV edit, but I'm fairly certain that the main thing cut from that version is Angelina Jolie's tits and a couple uses of the word fuck. Because I was so young when I watched it, it really left a lasting impression because I was intrigued with the idea of hacking and computers since I was a kid. Hackers is about a young boy named Dade Murphy, who was found guilty of breaking the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and crashing 1,507 Wall Street computers with his virus, and is forbidden from using a computer or touch-tone telephone until he reaches the age of 18. Shortly before that time, Dade and his mother moved to New York City, and shortly after that, Dade got his first computer since he was a kid. The main conflict of the movie is that Dade and his newfound fellow hacker friends in New York are being accused of creating a virus called the Da Vinci virus, a virus capable of sinking oil tankers and causing a major oil spill in the ocean, killing millions of ocean wildlife.
Unless $5 million are transferred to the following numbered account in 7 days, I will capsize 5 tankers in the Annex fleet.
That is the virus. Leonardo da Vinci.
The plot is very simple, but I think the biggest part of why I love this movie so much is the aesthetic. Everything from the visuals of the hacking sequences, opening with the fight between Dade and Acid Burn, to the Gibson sequences, the rollerblading, all of the over-the-top ridiculous outfits, and the soundtrack. They all combine into this edgy 90s kid attitude that still entertains me now like it did back when I watched it as a kid. At the time of release, hacking was this big mysterious thing that most people didn't really comprehend. In fact, one point of the movie actually directly addresses this point. Take a look.
You wanted to know who I am, Zero Cool? Well, let me explain the New World Order. Governments and corporations need people like you and me. We are samurai, the keyboard cowboys. And all those other people out there who have no idea what's going on are the cattle. Moo.
Nowadays, with viruses, malware, and spyware of all kinds being everywhere you can click, the movie is almost comical with many of its portrayals of hacking. While I say that, I will say that this movie does give a healthy dose of cheese that I'm pretty sure audiences of the time picked up on. But it was, and still is to me, a compelling movie. Let me explain. There's a lot of humor in the story that makes it lighthearted enough to give the rather grave potential outcomes some levity. You've got things like the names of the hackers themselves, Zero Cool being Dade's first handle, Crash Override being his new handle as a young adult, Acid Burn being the romantic interest, Kate Libby's handle.
Burn. You're Acid Burn. You booted me out of OTV? I'm Crash Override.
You're the moron that's been invading my turf?
Whoa. Crash and burn.
Meet serial killer. Eyes on Fruit Loops. But he does know things.
Lord Nikon being another friend who initially has his looming presence of authority amongst the group, and the Plague being the handle of the antagonist. There's also things like the introduction of Serial being him hawking copies of a mixtape.
I call this the greatest Zooks album, featuring artists like, I got some Hendrix on there, some Joplin, Mama Cass, Belushi, all great artists that are fixated on their own vomit. You can't get this in stores, man.
I couldn't have made that up if I tried, and I still to this day find that shit hilarious. One of my favorite parts of the movie is the competition to see who can pull off the best hack. And the bet, of course, being that if she wins, Dade becomes her slave, doing, stupid things like copyright cracking, things of that nature. But if he wins, Kate has to go on a date with him. Oh, also, Penn Jillette is the security monitor at the company Plague works for. Fuck, I keep saying Plague like it means something. I swear, watching this movie nowadays, he almost comes off like JP from Grandma's Boy.
I want to get you a black cobra, just to go around the neck.
JP, I gotta stay on top of these guys.
Please get on top of me.
At the same time, if you pay attention while looking around Dade's room and the few scenes that take place in there, they tell some of the story that wasn't explicitly told to the audience. The license plate on the wall is from Washington, which shows that they were living in Washington prior to New York, which, as someone who lived in Washington, I can completely understand the disdain for the concrete jungle.
Okay, I gotta get back to work. I'm gonna be home late. Would you try and please fill these out? Don't worry, it's only the rest of your life.
Right. Anything else? You want me to mow the lawn? Oops. Forgot. New York, no grass.
And unpack.
I will note that there's a point where Plague is threatening Dade with putting false charges on his mom in the state of Washington. But I didn't put that together with him formerly living there with her. I just figured that she had lived there at one point in her life when I watched this for the first few times. There's also the music posters on the wall, the two most notable being Nirvana on one wall and Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun on the other. Granted, those were very common in the era, and they're both bands that were formed in Washington, but they do tell you a bit about Dade. He's a kid who feels a lot of pain from his past, and these artists are what he can find solace in. I could be reading too much into it, but I think it was intentional considering the music that is played in the movie doesn't have that grunge sound that those two bands are known for, nor the darker tones in the lyrics. Personally, I always took Black Hole's Sun as a metaphor for wanting death to wash away his pain with the line, "Black Hole Sun, won't you come and wash away the rain?" But looking it up, Chris Cornell, may he rest in peace, claimed it was inspired by mishearing something on the news as Black Hole Sun, and thinking that would make a cool song name, then just playing with the words for word's sake. Then again, I feel like that's the definition of art. It makes you feel something, and it's subject to interpretation in countless ways if done right. To show that they did their homework regarding hacking itself, there's this clip where Serial is showing several hacking reference books.
Oh yeah, Technicolor Rainbow. Green one?
International Unix environments, computer security criteria, DoD standards. The Pink Shirt Book, Guide to IBM PCs. Devil Book, Unix Bible. Dragon Book, Compiler Design.
Yeah? What's that?
The Red Book, NSA Trusted Networks. Otherwise known as the ugly red book that won't fit on a shelf.
A good handful, if not all of these books, are actually real. I'll be honest, some of this clip is a bit, okay, this feels forced. But it makes sense that they'd be talking about it here since it does come up later on in the movie regarding the most commonly used passwords, as well as them getting busted for hacking from home like an idiot. On top of that, there's something shown by Razor and Blade where you could record the tones of coins being inserted into a payphone and spoof the payphone into thinking you inserted money into it by playing it back into the microphone. This apparently was called phreaking with a PH, and the most common device to do this with was called a red box. I just love the levels of research that went into the movie's script. It makes me wonder how much was researched and how much the writer, Raphael Moreau, already knew about hacking prior to making the script. Anyway, an even bigger deal that I didn't know until doing some research to add on to the script, Serial's real name, Emmanuel Goldstein, was taken from George Orwell's 1984 as the author of The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. For those unaware, this is the book that Winston, the main character of 1984, reads, which he believes is intended to open his mind to the reality of the world he lives in. Why this is particularly poignant to me is that Serial says around this time,
My life story. FYI, man, right? You can sit at home and do like absolutely nothing, and your name goes through like 17 computers a day. 1984, you're right, man. That's a typo. Orwell's here now. He's living large. We had no names, man. No names. We are nameless. Can I score a fry?
It's details like this that make me love this movie the more I watch it and learn about it. Even though it had some hokey aspects to it, it still had plenty of details that were accurate not only to hackers, but the society of the time. The 90s were certainly a precursor to the massive amounts of surveillance we witness in the modern age through every facet of life. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, services like Skype selling your information to advertisers, traffic cameras, passerbys with cell phones, hell, even your own cell phone collects your voice and video data. We live in an age where computers rule all, and while home computing became popular between the 80s and 90s, I don't think even the people back then could have predicted that a good majority of the people on the planet would have a personal phone with a computer built into it by the end of the next 20 years. Granted, we're not nearly as far as some science fiction had predicted. Hell, we just passed the year of both Back to the Future and Blade Runner, yet we don't have flying cars, time travel, or replicants. However, you give and take, predictions can only go so far. Back to the Future did get video calling right for the most part, and supposedly predicted 9/11, but that's a whole different can of worms.
And now, on with the show.
I think another part of what makes this movie particularly enjoyable to me is that the antagonist is only a bit older than the protagonists, as well as being a hacker. This makes the movie a literal battle of hackers. In this case, gray/white hat hackers versus a single black hat hacker, trying to get away with millions in the bank after framing a bunch of kids because hacking's scary! Like I said, hacking was such an unknown back then that it makes sense that these kids, as innocent as they were demonized by the media and the government.
It isn't a virus. It's a worm.
This one,
It nibbles. This is every financial transaction Ellingson conducts, yeah? From $1 million deals to the $10 that some guy pays for gas.
The worm eats a few cents from each transaction.
No one's caught it because the money isn't really gone. It's just data being shifted around.
And when the worm's ready, it zips out with the money and erases its trash.
I'm not making a blanket "I think hackers are innocent" claim or anything. In fact, there are plenty of asshole hackers who do it just for the lulz, like Lizard Squad, who took down PSN in 2011. At least Anonymous can claim to be hacktivists, where Lizard Squad did it for kicks and infamy. And now I'm on a watch list and in the sights of Lizard Squad. Let's move on before I get hacked. Fuck me. Thinking further on it now, I think a huge reason why this movie is so near and dear to my heart is because, like watching 80s movies, I can sort of vicariously live in the 90s through hackers when I'm watching it. I love those era of films. They tend to have some of my absolute favorites. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Weird Science, Real Genius, Ghostbusters, Airheads, Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, Hudson Hawk, Home Alone, Toy Story, Nightmare Before Christmas, The Big Lebowski, Groundhog Day, Jurassic Park, Independence Day, Men in Black, Pulp Fiction, Silence of the Lambs, The Crow, The Matrix. All of these movies and many, many more, in one way or another, shaped me into who I am today. Now that's not to say there aren't incredible films before then, as well as in the 2000s and 2010s. But my point is that this movie, Hackers, is something I can call my own. It's not a very commonly known movie, and it's one that was so captivating to me and still entertains me to this day that I have to give it the title of a movie that doesn't suck. Thank you for watching. I have a lot more videos like this planned for the future, so if you liked this, please click that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share with your fellow 90s kids. If you'd like to support the channel aside from the usual calls to action, I'm on Patreon with various tiers, and I've got a Ko-fi account. I'm streaming both here and on Twitch, so keep an eye out. Twitch.tv/RetroHellspawn for my Twitch channel, and keep an eye on your notifications for streams here. Anyway guys, until next time, this is Retro Hellspawn, signing out. Have a good one.